Hey, friends, welcome back to Positive Impact. Today, my guest, Ryan Meeks, from ordained minister to psychedelic chaplain. Ryan, thanks for being here, man.
Hey man, no problem. Happy to be here.
So, Ryan, how we want to start off is I want you to share what's been a transformational moment in your life that has catapulted you into the journey into the life you're living today.
Oh man, well, there's been a lot of them because every twist and turn of the life experience sort of adds its own flavor to the stew that is current you. So, um, you know, I think being raised in a pastor's household was a huge part of setting my trajectory. I was raised evangelical Christian. My dad was a large church minister. And that's what I ended up going into, eventually. Went to Bible college and um went the route of first working at a church and then taking like an internship opportunity with my dad's church so I could get more mentorship. I knew my dad would kind of pour into me more than anyone. And that was a great learning experience. He taught me so much about leadership and integrity, and went from there and planted a church with my wife in 2004 in the Seattle area, which grew really, really, really fast, way faster than I ever dreamed that it would. And a few years later, we were, one of the fastest growing churches in America for a few years, and
Hey, Ryan,
eventually,
why did you start the church? What was your intention?
well, I was 25, which is just crazy. What the hell are you doing starting a church at 25? You don't know anything. You don't even know yourself. But anyway, we were. And it was mostly because what we saw was kind of just not interesting to my age group. It was just kind of like, this is for old people. And we just happened to be the young people at an old person's event. So we wanted to start a community that made sense to us and people our age, without all the sort of overly religious stuff. And that hit a nerve. It was the right time. There was nothing kind of going on like it in the area, and so it just popped. And eventually, we were in 8 locations and like video, satellites broadcasting, that kind of stuff. But I was just falling apart. So I think maybe the a significant hinge moment in my life, if I had to pick one, would be when I stopped believing in the core tenets of evangelical Christianity. That was a big whoops, like, oh, I don't align with this anymore, and I'm starting to ask questions that I'm realizing I've been suppressing about what doesn't make sense here, and yeah.
Hmm. And so that was about 2010, if I did my homework correctly. And that
Yeah,
was your
yeah, that's
that
when it
was your
started.
slow exit from Christianity.
Yeah, I didn't know then that's what was happening. I was like, oh wow, I'm really going through this sort of refining experience of getting honing down on the real essential elements. And what I did instead was kind of fall out of the tree of Christianity, hitting one branch at a time on the way down. Like, oh, maybe this kind of Christianity. Hanging on as much as I could, and eventually just realized I was all the way on the ground.
Wow, that I think it's so appropriate, Ryan. Like where you're at, like your journey. There's ever since I met you over a year ago, there's been an energy that I was drawn to. There's you know, a respect. A part of me really admires you because of how you unapologetically stand in your truth. It's been my experience from knowing you that you are committed to truth more than anything else. And first off, just want to acknowledge you for that.
Thanks, man.
That's what draws me to you, and it's appropriate we're having this conversation because it feels like I'm having um, my own questioning of programs and systems in place that I no longer align with.
Yeah.
For people listening, it's the 12-step recovery community, and so a part of me can can relate to your story, and that's why I think people listening, maybe it's a relationship, it can be whatever for them, but I think for people to see in you that falling out of something that you were deeply believing in,
Hmm.
especially when you're the head of that church.
Yeah, that was an unfortunate happenstance.
So can you like tell us more about like that inner, it feels like friction or
Oh
turmoil
yeah,
of projecting one thing,
yeah.
but it feels like killing yourself slowly inside.
Yeah, for a few years, like I said, early on, I was like, oh, this is just a process of sort of deepening my commitment in ways that are more personal to me. And I guess in some ways that was true at the beginning, but eventually, sort of what evangelical Christianity would consider like core dogmas, I just could no longer pretend to believe, well, at least to myself. But there was so much at risk, right? There was a lot on the line. Like I could lose, my career, my community, my friendships. I didn't know if my wife would stay married to me if we weren't, you know, what Christians call equally yoked. If we weren't sort of aligned, is another sort of more new agey way to say it, spiritually. So I kept it to myself, thinking, this is a dark night of the soul. I'll come through it, reaffirm my faith, and then I'll be able to be like, look, pat myself on the back, like I made it through, and let me tell you my story of a harrowing journey. Unfortunately, it just completely unraveled, and I got to the point where I realized, one, I had to let my wife know, and that was scary, but obviously went really well, as you know, we're doing great. And then I had to start coming clean, to the congregation, like, because I had spent a couple of years just like basically reworking old sermons that either I had done before or like all my mentors had shared their sermons with me over the years. Like, hey, use my stuff, throw in your stories or whatever. So I was like a jukebox for a while, just going like, let me just play like D7 because I can't say what I really think right now. That'll cost me too
Mm.
much. So, even when I look back at pictures of that era, I can see how unhealthy I look. And, it was just taking a toll because I think it's important to articulate the difference between being committed to being right and being committed to the truth. And I say truth as a lowercase t, like I was committed to telling the truth, to living in like alignment with what was authentic, because I don't claim to be in alignment with the capital T truth. That feels really arrogant. Like I don't know what
Mm.
the absolute reality is. Like I'm exploring that still in my life, but I couldn't any longer pretend to, outwardly be this but inwardly be something else.
Absolutely. And for me, what's coming up, like for me, part of my identity for the last 8 years in my own journey with, the 12-step program, just this week, it feels like I've been able to grieve.
Hmm.
And it's like, I know in your teachings and knowing the things that you talk about, it's a dying. It's a
Oh yeah.
dying of an old way. And I know you talk about death a lot with your own journey.
Yeah.
And I think it's so healthy that we talk about death in a healthy way.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, death is our biggest cheerleader and the only appointment we will not be late for. We're gonna be right on time on that one. So, we need to start working with it. And obviously psychedelics is one way that I do that. And there's a lot of like sort of in all religious traditions, there are generally death practices, death meditations, things like that that sort of help us get into the body, into the present moment, and surrender to the inevitable truth of our either total annihilation, if that's your belief, or whatever transitional liminal space that is into whatever's next, if there is such a thing. So I totally agree with you. Dying to old forms of who we think we are, and our attachments to ways that we've sort of decorated ourselves. Like, I'm this and I'm into that and I believe in this. We're like
Mm.
teenagers just putting pictures on our locker, trying to be like, figure out who we are. And as you grow and develop and get your ass kicked by life, some of those things are going to change. And it's going to be some of them you get really excited to get rid of, like, yeah, fuck that. But others of them are like, ooh, I got a lot of life from this. This makes me feel scared and vulnerable if I let go of it. Who am I? And so the question of identity comes in when we let go of things that we have held on the level of identity.
Ironically, for me, just this week, it's felt like a plant medicine journey.
Hmm.
The surrender part, the
Yeah.
choice of
Yeah.
I can surrender to this experience and let go and trust, or I can continue to hold on and resist it, and it's going to be fucking painful and bring more suffering.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this week I've gotten to experience it in real life, what felt like a plant medicine journey of letting go versus holding on. And the more I hold
Yeah.
on, the more I get my ass kicked and it's painful and there's suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a difference between letting go and pushing away, you know? And one is the mature version and the other is the mature version, right? If we have to let something go, we let it go. That's a gentle sentence. We just open our hands and allow. We don't like, and there's a, sometimes we have to go through adolescent forms to get the kind of separation we need. That's what adolescence is, by the way. It's a push off of your parents. Fuck you, mom and dad, you don't know anything. And frankly, it's a healthy part of psychological development. But as we age, if we don't get out of that, we're going to just keep repeating these loops of like every time I need to grow and develop and move on, I have to sort of break relationship in an unhealthy way. It's like people who always hate their exes. Like that's evidence of never growing past that stage.
Absolutely. In one of your blogs, speaking of death, and we're going to get this is a perfect segue to the cancer
Huh.
in it was 2017. But in your blog, you said, when I had cancer, there were days I deeply grieved, thinking this isn't how I want to die, which led to the question, how do I want to die? Which led to the realization, the answer to how one wants to die is ultimately the answer to how we ought to live.
Yeah, I still believe that one.
How much of your cancer was related to the stress and the dying of your identity of saying you no longer believe in Christianity?
Great question. I don't think there's any way to prove one way or the other, but I do think, stress is linked to disease. So anytime you're in dis-ease and you've had a ton of stress on you, you can bet they're linked at some level. I don't know what percent, but for sure, I think they were dancing together.
So you get hit with cancer. You got a cancer diagnosis in
Yep.
2017. You're
Yep.
still leading your church at this point.
Yep. Yep. At this point, we definitely exited evangelicalism, and we were still sliding down the down the mountain towards some sort of like saucy new age open-ended spirituality. So it was more like progressive Christianity that was sort of open to the gifts of all faiths, but used primarily the lexicon and symbol set and language of Christianity.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So tell me about your experience with cancer.
Um, well, I mean, in short, it was like one of the best experiences of my life, although it was horrifically uncomfortable. Um, it was sort of the opportunity to get pummeled at the level of ego and to have death sort of mock me in a really healthy way that was like, why are you worried about so many stupid things? I was over concerned with whether people liked me. There would be certain lies going around about what I did and didn't do, or um, just stuff where I felt my character was being slandered unfairly. Because I'm like, look, I'm not saying I'm the right guy in the universe. I'm just saying that this is where I'm at. And rather than people being like, okay, I get that, but I disagree, people were there needed to be, for some people at least, something to push against, something to attack, like we kind of talked about. And I took that kind of personally. But once I had cancer, I was like, who fucking cares? Like, I'm going to die. Like, one, I could die of cancer, which I didn't, but I'm going to die someday. And do I really want to spend this much time just wringing my hands over, every person who doesn't just have a 5-star review of me? It was really good for me just to grow past that and realize, like, someday I will die, and whether it's over cancer or something else, there's going to be a really small group of people in that room, and I don't need to really be playing my life to the applause of anything more than that group, you know? Like love the people in my life, you know, be kind as much as I can and live at peace with as many people as possible, you know, as much as it depends on me. Those are the words of Christ. But beyond that, like letting go of a lot, you know, and then also it was sort of the end of what was left of any sort of religion in me. And I guess I would term that as, you know, organized religion. Like I just was like, I don't have a clue what the word God refers to. I don't know what happens when we die, and I don't know how people should live. Like, and sort of exiting that arrogance, I suppose, and entering a little bit more of a relationship to this mystery that is reality, or this mystery that is living me and breathing me. So it was a good experience, besides the, you know, nausea and losing a ton of weight and most of my hair.
That's a stark difference, everything you just said, to your message leading that megachurch. Like it's a completely new way of being. And I just feel this. What comes up is your commitment to truth. It feels like your commitment to truth, Ryan, was born through your cancer.
Yeah, well, it was certainly clarified. You know, when I started the church, we were getting in trouble for over 10 years for, you know, not doing church right, even when I was in Christianity. So we were always sort of the black sheep of the church world. You know, we, you know, had kegs in the, you know, office and stuff, you know, whatever stupid stuff that Christians would freak out about. But I think that the need to get to something true and authentic has always been part of who I am. I don't know if that's my Scorpio rising or what it is. And that has clarified and deepened over the years. And in some ways has been part of what has led me into more authentic ways of living, for sure.
And if in those authentic ways of living show up now in plant medicine.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I work with lots of different drugs for, you know, opening my heart, for relationship healing and development, and, you know, really personal and spiritual growth, I think are ways to describe why I come to particular drugs. Yeah.
Okay. And through it all, your relationship with your wife has been, I think, from an outside, like I think 26 years now. You guys have been
Yeah.
together,
Yep. Yep.
and she is your partner in crime in everything you do. Like your commitment to be
Absolutely.
of service, like you are a psychedelic facilitator,
Yep. Yep.
and
We do
so
that together.
and doing it together. Tell me about your relationship with her and um, how it how it translates into what you do for your work in the psychedelic facilitator space.
Um, well, I mean, we're just best friends. We met when we were 16 and 17, and I think the miracle of our relationship and the gratitude that is just never ending over it is that we've been able to grow and change while holding hands. Like, you know, and sometimes I'm a little bit ahead and or she's a little bit ahead, and we've been able to give each other enough space to grow and develop and change without having to stop dancing together, which I don't think is common. You know, I'm just as surprised as anyone that two teenagers could go through everything we've been through and still so deeply in love. And so I think that's a big part of our work. You know, when we just do coaching with couples or individuals around relationships and parenting and sexuality as well. But when we facilitate or accompany people or guide people when they're taking drugs, you know, I think Michelle and I's connection, the safety of our relationship, and the depth of the field that we create just in being together is a part of the safety that people feel. Um, and that allows, you know, I mean, for people to go deeply into these sort of alternate states of awareness, these deeper heart-centered spaces, or, you know, sort of transpersonal states of awareness, they need to feel safe, not only in the space but with the people that they're with. And for sure, there's no question that our relationship and the loving field that we, you know, sort of put out into the world is part of that. And then just Michelle is like the sweetest, most loving, kind woman. So nurturing, so open-hearted. So there's no question that that's a huge part of the kind of breakthroughs and healing that we get to be a part of in people's lives. I'm so grateful.
Yeah. And full disclosure, I've got personally firsthand, I've gotten to experience that love and support and safety that you and Michelle provide. And that's a big reason why I wanted to have you on, Ryan, and just kind of share your story, because I've been very blessed to have you and Michelle in my life, and guide me in a safe way, and in one of the most transformational experiences of my life in
Mm.
my plant medicine journey with you and Michelle. And I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, man. Well,
And
you're so welcome. It's the honor and joy of our life to do this.
so for people listening, like, psychedelics, they get a bad, there's a stigma around it. So for
Yeah.
people listening who are not aware of the psychedelic space, and, where we are as a culture with, the science and the clinical trials and the breakthroughs of the healing modalities that the medicine provides,
Hmm.
can you give people just an overview of like where we are right now in this minute of our culture and the breakthroughs and the healing modalities of the medicine of psychedelics?
I mean, I could try for sure. I'm certainly not I'm not a doctor or a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a researcher, but I am, I stay up on this stuff for sure, and I'm incredibly interested in it. So, um, I'll spare you the unsavory story of the drug war, but essentially, all these things are illegal because of racism. That's the fastest way to say it. The drug war was a war on people, and people figured out that if we just criminalize heavily the drugs that people who take that are not white do, then we can stay in power. So, um,
So that was 1960s and 70s, right? The drug war that you're
yeah,
referencing.
yeah. I mean, but we've been sort of at war with particular kinds of drugs. Opium, when for the Chinese became, oh, here's how we can sort of marginalize this group of people. This is an old story, right? So, um, a lot of the sort of why we make something illegal, there's a mythology around like the government cares about you, which is just, if you still believe that, like, I've got an iceberg to sell you in the Antarctic, like you're pretty gullible. That's not the reason. I mean, alcohol is so harmful for the human body, and like we don't need to go into that, right? I'm sure you've covered that in this podcast. And of course, you can buy it any fucking where you want to buy it. And of course, kids are everywhere in junior high and elementary schools vaping right now. Um, so it's really not about safety when you compare it to, all other drugs that are available, whether it's opioids or nicotine or alcohol. So if it was about your loving government wants to take good care of you, then that's out. Now that's not to say there are no risks. I mean, there's nothing has no risks. If you want to
Yeah.
get on the carnivore diet, let me tell you, you're taking a huge risk. It's not illegal. So saying that there are risks says that that's why we should all be afraid is also a silly sort of logic to go down. There's no known lethal dose of LSD. Like you could take a sheet of acid and have the worst week of your life, but you'll be fine. You'll be fine. But you drink a half rack of whiskey and you can have some issues.
Hmm.
So the safety profile is remarkable. And of course, now that it's finally been legal for a while to study these drugs, which is essential for public safety, if you really care about the public, you'd be doing these. We would have all this information already because we've been studying them for a long time. The prohibition created a bunch of nonsense, so we're catching up. That we were doing a lot of studies, then it got it all shut down, and now we've been doing really a ton since 2018, but a little bit before then. I think 2006 was the first time we reopened to start testing again, trials with psilocybin. 2006, I think. So the long and short of it is that it's incredibly effective. People who taking essentially, 2 to 3.5 grams, or something between like 20 and 30 milligrams of psilocybin, um, to have these incredible breakthroughs, especially in relationship to PTSD and treatment-resistant depression. So when you compare these things to, say, SSRIs or some of the other solutions that are put forward, if you just look at the science, you have to say, wow, we need to keep pushing on this because we're not having this kind of success in many directions when we're working with things that just are not responding to the treatment options that are available. And of course, in our country that does such a shit job of taking care of our veterans, this is really important. We
Yeah.
need to find some solutions. All this patriotism, but very little interest in what we say are the people who are protecting our freedoms. I'd like to see that actually in action. Less memes, less flags, less rah-rah, and more actual supporting of the veterans. That would be really nice. And so we're starting to see that as it relates to psychedelic research and treatment. It's also worth mentioning that most of the most positive outcomes are combined with the drug and some form of talk therapy, some sort of relationship. And I'm big on that because I really think that most of our pain is interpersonal. It comes from people. Life is great, but people suck, and also people are the best part of life. So it's something about the therapeutic relationship, which is why we meet with people both before and after when we work with folks, where a lot of the healing takes place, is learning how to open our hearts, how to trust in relationship, not just life in general, but trust other people. So, yeah, I don't know how much more I would say other than the results are good, they're positive. To be afraid of psychedelics because they're dangerous is nonsense if you're not demanding alcohol be illegal. And then it's also worth saying that there are adverse side effects. Like psychedelics are not good for everyone, and we need to do a lot of research on specifically the adverse side effects that some people do experience, and ask, why are they having those? What mitigates those? How do we help people through those? The classic phrase is bad trip. They do happen. I don't see it a lot, but we spend a lot of time on what's called set and setting, making sure that people are in the right mindset, and then of course in the right space, and then have the right ability to be in enough of a relationship with us to trust us. That's a very important thing. So we don't see much adverse effects in our practice. And I wouldn't call any and all challenge adverse. In fact, I hope that people face a little bit of challenge. Usually at some point in the experience with whatever drug they're working with, people will have sort of a climactic moment of a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of tension. There's some sort of build up to a eventual, as you said earlier, a surrender or a letting go or an aha moment, an insight or a download, as people say. And that's really productive work. So not all, difficulty or challenge is necessarily an adverse experience. But if you're not feeling supported, there's no one to guide you, if you're feeling out of control and you're not able to break through, then people do experience some of these adverse side effects. And then lastly, just that people with history of psychosis, mental illness, personality disorder, schizophrenia. These are categories of people who definitely should not do psychedelics. And there's more, high blood pressure is something to look into because that does elevate during high dose experiences. So there's a number of different things, traumatic brain injuries, things like that. So there's plenty of good, solid information out there on this. So I want to say now that, there's sort of our culture has a boner for psychedelics. It's also important to say, hey, you can hurt yourself and you can traumatize yourself. And it's, street drugs, because we've made them illegal, now street drugs can be sort of laced or fentanyl can be in ketamine on the street. So, you need to be careful. You can test your drugs by getting a test kit on Amazon, even sells them. So be safe, be smart, get educated, and learn how to be a good adult drug user. Drugs are good if they're used properly.
And I'm glad you put up the guardrails because they're not for everybody. And they're,
No. No way.
And so there are people out there that just inappropriately and dangerously say, psychedelics and plant medicines for everybody, and it's just
Right.
it's
Just like
not.
that's like saying alcohol's for everyone. Like that's
Yeah,
ridiculous. Like I
yeah,
have plenty of friends who have been sober for decades, and no way I would suggest that, oh, you know what's great for you is to have a glass of wine on Thanksgiving. Like that's insanity. Universalizing a particular is a big mistake people tend to make a lot, especially on the internet. This worked for me, therefore it's good for everyone.
yeah.
That's nonsense.
Yep. And so thank you for putting up the guardrails and the disclosure of it's not for everybody, certain segments of the population. And one thing I'm really passionate about, Ryan, is why you're on the podcast right now is, the breakthroughs, the treatment resistant depression and the success rates of what psilocybin in particular versus SSRIs. SSRIs for people, it's the antidepressant, the most prevalent antidepressant. And I have a lot of people very close to me that are on antidepressants, SSRIs.
Yeah.
A lot of people who I love dearly. And that's why this topic is so important right now, Ryan, because my intention for having you on is to bring awareness and access and information that people might otherwise not have,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because people, the Western approach. And when I first got sober 8 years ago, they put me on an antidepressant,
Yeah.
an SSRI. And over the years, I weaned myself off because it wasn't in alignment with my values and how I wanted to show up in the world, and more of a holistic approach. And I just really want to emphasize the point of there is medicine available to people, and access to this medicine available to people who might want to start to look at their relationship, if they are on antidepressants, with making changes in their life that they might otherwise not know existed.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to just responsibly say that, it's not good for just everyone to just get off their SSRIs. For some people that could be incredibly dangerous to themselves or others. So SSRIs are great as a tool that can be really helpful and life-saving for folks. And if you feel trapped and you're interested in other opportunities to work with whatever is causing you the need to go on an SSRI, then that's great, and I'm all for that. Just want to make sure to even just note that for some people they're the right thing. But I also have plenty of friends who are like they don't want to be on them and have been on them for a long time, or their dose has just been going up and up and up. And so yeah, this is exciting time that we're looking into some other solutions that might help us, move through a dependency, which is always good to move beyond, right? We're finding, I've certainly have a lot of personal experience with folks who weaned off of their SSRIs, did high dose psilocybin work, and have not returned to their SSRIs. That does not mean, I'm not universalizing that particular, I'm just saying it does happen. And I've seen it happen quite a few times. But that wouldn't mean that necessarily that's what everyone should do, or that that's the guaranteed outcome for everyone. That's not a scientific statement to make at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I really appreciate you acknowledging, the veterans. And I love how you, instead of the means, like what's action that's really going to make a difference in the lives of the men and women who sacrificed everything for us. And so I'm really passionate about, empowering our veterans with medicine, like and access and availability to these veterans who, the suicide and the addiction rates of that population. Like what are we doing about it? How are we helping them, instead of just putting up a flag and putting a meme on social media? I think it's so important that we're having this conversation, and there's a lot of great work being done with different groups and legislation that's being passed finally, that's bringing more access to the people who need it the most.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a long way to go, but it is nice to see that there's definitely momentum right now. And that's what's good. One really cool thing about the military, even though I am very much not pro-war at all, or the military industrial complex, But when something's good for the military, it generally gets funding. So what's really cool is that we're seeing so much efficacy with MDMA treatment and psilocybin treatment for PTSD, and that just bodes very well. Like as soon as like, whoa, we can help soldiers with this. This helps the military. Then it's going to start running through. And of course, Michelle and I have plenty of experience working with um, military men and women as well as first responders with some of these compounds, and of course, beautiful healing results as well.
And I think one of the clinical trials I saw was that 2 doses of MDMA supported therapy completely eliminates the trauma.
Yeah, I think I would say that it's like I think it was two or more, maybe two, somewhere between 2 and 6 sessions of psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. After that, they no longer tested as having PTSD anymore. Yeah, just to be precise, without
Thank you.
overstating. There's what I think of, and let me just clarify why I'm doing that, not to correct you, but there's such excitement around psychedelics that there's a lot of hyperbole. And when there's a lot of hyperbole, people take wild, dangerous risks. And I don't want to see people get hurt, you know. So we still need to be safe. It's not regulated. You can get bad drugs, and it's not good for everyone. So safety, safety, safety. That's always our number one.
That's why you're on, man, to put the guardrails on for me as well, because I get too excited.
Yeah, no,
But
I mean, me too. I get so excited, but also recognizing that like it's, psychedelics, there's a lot of ways towards healing, and yay for psychedelics. We have another one. But sometimes it gets a little overblown, like psychedelics are going to save the world, and oh, that's a lot to put on psychedelics. we
yeah,
we we one heart at a time is a good way to go about healing. But also, like a lot of people are depressed because our society is broken. And just adding a drug to the mix when we're not willing to fix systemic injustice, is a little silly and naive of why people are depressed. Oh, you're missing the perfect drug. Like, I'm not sure if that's true. We have a broken, lonely society, and we have a broken male population. Um,
yeah,
and these things are not just lacking the perfect drug.
absolutely. And another blog post that I want to highlight is you talk about failure to integrate. In the integration post ceremony of any um, psychedelic journey,
Yeah,
integration is the most important part.
absolutely. Yeah, just meaning in simple terms, like, so what? What are you going to do? What is the measurable change? I, if you've been around any group of people who are super into ayahuasca, there are people out there who have done 300 ceremonies with Mother Ayahuasca, and they're still pathetic losers.
They're still an asshole.
Yeah, it's like, and that's not the failure of ayahuasca, any more than it would be a failure of Buddhism for someone who went to a Vipassana retreat to have not transformed. Like, that's not Buddhism's failure. That's not the meditation teacher's failure. Like, we go and we have experiences, and those experiences can catalyze something in us. Um, but it's up to us to live differently, to take these allies of these drugs are allies, not answers, but to take these allies, and then here's the very unsexy truth: it's still up to you to change. It's not just the drug that's going to fix you. It can give you a broader perspective, a little freedom from your repetitive thinking. It can open up potentiality and creative thinking. It can help you to forgive and open your heart. But you still have to do the work of restoring the relationship, of rebuilding that bridge, of developing healthy habits, of just putting one foot in front of the other and quit eating cheeseburgers and make the change. So yes, that's what I mean about integration. It's absolutely central.
Beautiful. What is a piece of advice, Ryan, that you would give to your 18-year-old self?
Oh man, if me today tried to tell 18-year-old me advice, 18-year-old me would be like, you are a dangerous person. So I think I would just probably ask that kid questions about his life and look for creative ways to express that he's okay to him. Just tell him you're a good person, and keep trusting in your heart, you know? Yeah. Probably would not try to give him advice. I don't know that he could have heard it.
Great point. Yeah, my 18-year-old self wouldn't listen in either.
Yeah, it's like that part of the process is like hitting your head against a wall, and making some mistakes and doing things that hurt yourself and others, and then taking responsibility for that. Like I needed to do that, you know.
Yeah. Last question. If you had, it's your last supper, you get a meal.
Mexican food. Oh, okay. Sorry, was that not the question?
It's your last supper. You're going to die tomorrow.
Okay.
What do you have
Oh, okay.
for
That's part
food?
of
And
it.
then who do you have? Who do you have to share the meal with? You can have anybody you want.
Oh, that's easy. Well, I would like Mexican food, please. And my wife, Michelle. No question about it. And I probably would just push the burrito onto the floor and stare into her eyes for whatever time I had left.
Damn. Yeah, you have something special, man. And I want to acknowledge you because how you show up in your relationship with Michelle, it's something I really respect and admire. And I get to see it, and I've experienced you both. And it's not bullshit just saying one thing and doing something else. It's something you truly embody and live. And I know she does that as well. And it's really inspiring for me and as somebody in a relationship, um, to evolve and to share that love and do your own work, but to share that partnership together. I want to acknowledge you because
Thanks, man. I
it's
feel so lucky. I really do. I don't know how it worked out, but I'm just enjoying it so much.
I can feel it, man. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you coming
Hey,
on.
it was my pleasure, man. It was good to see you.
So for people listening,
Yeah.
if they want support, if they want information, if they want to have a conversation with you and Michelle,
Yeah.
and just learn more, what do you recommend they do?
Well, you can reach out. I have a website, loveisthepoint.com. And I'm on Instagram, Ryan T. Meeks. My wife is on there too, revolve.fit. She works in holistic health and nutrition coaching. And then we do all the rest of the stuff together as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that you do that I really wanted to, one of the things that you offer, making meaning in the mystery.
Yeah.
Tell us just a quick snippet of what that
Sure.
offering is that you
Yeah.
provide for a service. What is it?
Yeah. Yeah. So, as someone who sort of came out of a childhood faith, that was handed to me, um, I work with a lot of people who, the word is deconstructed. They deconstructed their faith or exited their faith and kind of feel lost about how to make sense out of life because that there was an institution that used to do that for you, right? And you used to sort of live by the playbook. And then for other people, maybe they didn't grow up with any of that, but they also are living in a world trying to figure out how to organize themselves in a sacred way towards reality, even if they're atheists, right? Which I certainly resonate with a lot of that way of thinking because I don't have the answers. And I think there's a way to approach that doesn't need religion, that life is sacred enough. And so I coach people on how to approach life itself in a sacred way.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
So loveisthepoint.com.
that's right.
I'll put it in the show notes. I'll put the Instagram handle for you and Michelle. Yeah, man. Thank you for how you show up in the world. Thank you for your friendship. And thanks for your commitment to truth.
Hey, man, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Andrew.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next week.